For those of you joining over on YouTube, getting ready to go live here on TikTok, obviously going to be talking news, politics now that we are past Thanksgiving. Um, we're just now waiting for people to join in. Going to be talking, like I said, news and politics, which you probably already know if you found me here on YouTube. Got a lot to talk about. Uh, Donald Trump and his tariffs. Um, for those of you joining in, we are going to be talking news, politics, things like that. Um, Donald Trump is going to have to make a decision early. Him and the Republicans are going to have to decide early in their um, administration into next year whether or not they are going to expand, keep, remove, etc. Joe Biden's extended subsidies for the Affordable Care Act. Now, considering Donald Trump goes back and forth on whether or not he wants to completely upend the Affordable Care Act, if he wants to make it better, or what he wants to do with it, we don't know what he wants to do with those subsidies. Now, from what I read on those subsidies, there's like 12 million people that, because of the extended subsidies, now have insurance coverage that normally wouldn't. With the Affordable Care Act prior. So we have to see what they end up choosing to do there as far as whether or not they want to extend those subsidies. It currently makes it a lot more affordable for people to get their insurance and to have better coverage than they would otherwise qualify for if they could qualify at all. Now, J.D. Vance has said he's got a plan of some kind that would basically go back to what it was pre Affordable Care Act, which would be allowing for pre-existing conditions and insurance companies being able to drop you, etc. And no, I don't think anybody really wants to see that, at least the people who are affected by it. I remember what it was like pre uh, Affordable Care Act. TJ says I have concepts of a plan. Yeah, that's TJ, one of my moderators, or my only moderator. Does a great job out there making sure we don't get mass reported and taken down. But I remember what it was like pre Affordable Care Act when a lot of people had to have their coverage through their employer. They couldn't get affordable coverage on their own because they couldn't get into a group. I know people who had to have their coverage through their small employer, who might only have 10 people working for them and paid hundreds of dollars a month for, suboptimal coverage, but that's all they could get for their little employer. Now you bring in the Affordable Care Act, and they could get access to a bigger pool with subsidies, things like that, and get much better insurance. And they weren't tied to their job because of having access to any insurance. If you needed it, you had, if you were in through the Affordable Care Act, you have the ability to move from job to job. And that's something people, I think, have kind of taken for granted. But I remember what it was like when you got on with a company and they offered you insurance. A lot of people stayed because it was hard to get on to the next place with insurance. Sure, I had some people that worked for me who got in on the insurance. They got themselves and their kids and everybody through on doctor's visits, made it, a couple of weeks, and then would dip out and quit and go find work somewhere else. But then they would put another 6-9 months in another job to a year or more before they got up on the insurance and did the same thing again, even if it paid better. So we'll see what Donald Trump does with those subsidies. I am hoping they end up extending them, if not expanding on them, and allowing more people to be covered. Now, that's probably wishful thinking, but I'm hoping. Ultimately, I think we need to expand the Affordable Care Act and make more people have access to cheaper insurance. I mean, we have enough in this country, we should be able to do some kind of single payer in insurance, type thing, similar to what a lot of other countries have been able to do. I'm sure we could figure it out and do it in a way that would actually be more affordable for everybody. Beyond that, Fox had a guest on, was talking about Donald Trump and his tariffs, and even Fox was saying that those tariffs are going to cost people money. It's going to cause prices to go up. Preventative medicine would make sense. So, yeah, with Republicans, yeah, exactly. The idea of doing something in advance to make things cheaper, or, just dealing with medicine. A company I worked for several years ago had a program where you had to do a few things. It wasn't a whole lot. You had to do a health screening, a preventative screening, and like a couple other things, and get like a flu shot. And they saved you some money on your insurance because they found if you did those things, that it saved them money in the long run. And preventative medicine goes a long way to making healthcare affordable. We've got a lot to do within this country. We could do a lot more with healthcare and making things way more affordable. The cost of healthcare and insurance and stuff has gotten completely out of hand. Even with the Affordable Care Act, it's so expensive. If one thing goes wrong, you could end up bankrupt and losing, if you have a house, you could lose your house, etc., from a medical bill. And we should be able to do something better in this country. But getting rid of the protections we currently have with the Affordable Care Act is not the way to get to better. So we'll see if they keep those subsidies around. I hope they do. For those that need it, I posted a TikTok about that earlier today, and I posted it up over on my YouTube page. And somebody commented that says if the subsidies go away, they lose their insurance, and without their insurance, they can't afford their medicines and their treatments, and they won't be here. And that is a very real outcome of these subsidies going away. Now, ultimately, one of the things with this program is it's going to have to go through Congress. And with the House, Republicans are looking at anywhere from a 1 to a 3-seat majority in the House. As it's currently looking, they are going to have 220 seats to 215 seats for the Democrats, with 3 members of the Republican Party having been pulled to be in Donald Trump's cabinet. One of those being Matt Gaetz, who then pulled his name out of the running, but will not be taking his seat next session. So that means it's going to be 219 to 215. The Republicans have such a thin margin, they're not going to be able to pass much without Democratic help. And that is something we need to consider is, in order to get some of this stuff done, the Democrats could step in and say, hey, yeah, we'll back this thing. We don't like it, but we'll back it if you end up, extending these, healthcare subsidies, something like that. That is always a possibility. Then you got the Senate. Senate's got 53 Republicans, 47 Democrats or Democratic-leaning independents, and there's the filibuster. They need 60 votes to pass things on to a final vote. Now, they only need a simple majority once they get to the final vote, but they have to get there. And you got the filibuster. Democrats can block a lot. So again, I think they could turn around and say, hey, help us out. Let's get this passed. And that's how politics used to work. There used to be a lot more bipartisanship. Pre-Donald Trump, probably pre-Barack Obama, there was more bipartisanship when it came to politics. Some of the stuff was politics was boring. In a way, they would do what they needed to do, and they would get things done. Uh, and they would do that kind of horse trading is, hey, I want to do this, you want to do that. You vote for my thing, I vote for your thing, and that's kind of how it all went. So I think there's a great possibility that the Democrats could force the Republicans to do some of what they want to do. Oh, here come the Trumpers, the MAGAs, the Trumplefucks. Get them, TJ. I know you're good at it. Uh, but yeah, they have. Democrats are going to be able to, I think, force the Republicans to do a little bit with those thin margins. You know, Republicans, they can't agree with themselves. Look at how much did they pass out of the House of Representatives in this last Congress, the one that we are currently in. How much did the House pass? Not a lot. They didn't get through, and pass a whole ton of legislation that just made its way and died in the Senate. They couldn't get it out of the House, and they had a 5-seat majority. They could lose 5 votes and still pass stuff. And they're going to be even weaker than that this time. Now, they're going to be pushing back against Donald Trump quite a bit on some of this stuff. And I think that's what ultimately is going to need to happen, is that they get pushed back, they're going to push back against him because they don't need him. You know, he can't run for re-election in 2028, despite what he may say or he may try to bluster up or do. He can't end up changing the Constitution. They don't have the votes to pass an amendment to make it so he can run again. That ain't going to happen. They can't pass an amendment making, members of the House have 10-year, term limits, 10 years or whatever. They can't do any of that. They don't have the votes. And most of Donald Trump's endorsed picks outside of 2024 have failed. 2020, most of his endorsed picks failed. 2022, most of his endorsed picks failed. 2018, most of his endorsed picks failed. Donald Trump doesn't bring a lot to the table, and as he's getting more unhinged, he brings less to the table. They may have to push back against him, and I've been saying it's possible. It is a long shot, but it is possible that if he gets bad enough, the Republicans may have no choice but to either put pressure on J.D. Vance to use the 25th Amendment or go through a impeachment and remove him. Because if he's bad enough that even the Republicans go, hey, we can't, we can't get anything done. We can't back this, and we can't get reelected if we back the stuff he's pushing for. They may have no choice, but instead of letting the country burn, but remove him. And when they do, if they do, and if I was J.D. Vance and the Republican Party for the first time in American history actually successfully impeached and removed a president, I'm walking the damn line. I wouldn't be going crazy. I wouldn't be doing anything. I would be trying my best to say, to walk that narrow road so I don't become the next one gone. Now, also, should that happen, I want to clarify, if somehow through the 25th Amendment, through Donald Trump passing because he's not in the best of shape, he doesn't have a good diet, or anything like that, or if they impeach and remove him, J.D. Vance would, yes, become president. And when he becomes president, it would not make Speaker Mike Johnson the vice president. That is not how that works. J.D. Vance would get to select his own VP, and both houses of Congress would have to approve that selection. The only way Speaker Johnson would become president is if something happened to J.D. Vance and Donald Trump at the exact same time, before J.D. Vance could appoint and have a successor VP nominated, or if something happened to Donald Trump, J.D. Vance becomes president, and again, even if it's 2 weeks later, something happened to J.D. Vance, you know, before Congress had approved a VP, then Mike Johnson would become the acting president for the remainder of the term. It's not automatic, and it wouldn't actually, help, or it wouldn't actually make Speaker Johnson the next in line. It only applies if there's something catastrophic to continue the government, to make sure government works the way it's intended. TJ's doing a great job getting rid of them. Unlike some creators, I go ahead and we block all of the Trump supporters, the MAGAs, because they don't add much to the conversation itself. What they typically do is they come in, they report your videos, they report your lives. They don't add much to the conversation, and they make stupid comments. TJ says that's the smart way. They just report you. Exactly. Well, and Lowell says, why are they even here? That's what I have never understood. If I scroll past and I see a MAGA person, talking on a live, I keep going. I don't want to be involved, but they come in because they want to be the victim. They want to be, they're always looking for a fight. And, they want to stir the pot. I either scroll past, or most of the time I go in and I block them. Even if I happen to scroll past them, they're gone. Block them. Because that way they can't find my stuff and report me, take me down. But they want to come in looking for a fight, and as a couple other creators have said, some of them want to build their, they come into your live trying to, roast you, heckle you, whatever, and they want people to jump in on them and start following them because they're doing it, because it's the only way they can get a following. Just doesn't make any sense to me. Like I said, they don't add to the conversation. Now, I lean Democratic, but I am an independent. I used to listen to both sides. And if a Republican came to me with good ideas, or ideas typically in general, that weren't stupid, I would listen to them. I have voted Republican, I have voted Democratic, I have voted independent. And I have listened every which way. If somebody is on the right side and they come up with ideas, I'm not going to immediately dismiss them because of what party they're affiliated to. But most Republicans have not come up with good ideas lately. TJ says that's not going to happen these days. Exactly. They don't come up with good ideas, or any ideas really. They have concepts of plans, and their main plan is to back whatever nonsense Donald Trump is saying at this point in time. Whatever his latest thing is. They can't govern. Yeah, exactly, TJ. What have they gotten through the House? Let's see. Cello Basics says, what do you think the actual chances of a certification of the election? I think the election gets certified. I don't think anything happens. I have not seen anything being reported anywhere credible that says anything's going to change the outcomes as is. Now, if something comes up, and as we get close here, we're just about to start December. There are dates in December when every state will have to start having their state elections certified. And if something comes up between now and then to change those certifications to a different result than what has been so far reported on, we'll have to see what that would look like. But I'm not hearing of any court cases. I'm not hearing any indictments. I'm not hearing of anything that leads me to believe the states aren't going to certify their individual elections Um, anyway, other than what has been reported with Donald Trump winning. Now, when it gets to January 6th, Kamala Harris is going to sit there. She's going to count the votes because that's her job. Back in 2022, they passed the Electoral Count Reform Act and said basically the vice president's role is ceremonial. It's open the envelope, read what's on the card, tally the votes. And in order to object, like they tried to do in 2020 with Joe Biden, in 2020 it took one member of the House, one senator. In 2024, it will take 20% of the House, which is like 100 members of the House, and 20 senators, both, to object to any given state. Before it's not going to be a thing. The election's going to get certified whether we like it or not. And now we have to look at what is reasonably going to happen as far as what kind of pushback there's going to be from the Democrats because Republicans can't govern. They've proven that they can't govern. They're going to have such a thin margin in Congress, they're not going to get much passed. Jim says there's going to be a war. I don't think so. From who? Who's going to start it? And if it's the MAGA Trump supporters, why? They got their way. That's the thing that I don't understand. They got their way and they're still angry. You know, they won. They have the House, they have the Senate, they have the presidency. Donald Trump gets at least 2 years to theoretically pass and do whatever he wants. Whatever he thinks is going to actually make America great again. Except Republicans can't get along with themselves. Remember his first term. The first half of his term, he was in this same boat. They gave him the House, they gave him the Senate, and he had the presidency. They shut the government down. They couldn't agree to keep the government open and keep it funded. They couldn't agree with themselves. It's going to be more of the same. Republicans can't govern and they can't agree with themselves. It's ridiculous. We've got, we got special elections coming up next year, and they're going to be staggered. That's why they're MAGA. They're always angry, don't know how to relax and enjoy life. Yeah, exactly. They're always mad about something. We've got December starting. It's Black Friday right now. We're after Thanksgiving, which means we've officially entered the Christmas season. Which means it's about time to start hearing from the MAGA Republicans, the far-right Christians in this country, about the non-existent war on Christmas. It's going to be non-stop posts about how they found Christmas decorations decorated in ways they don't approve of that are not correct. And it's just a war on Christmas. And the yearly fight about whether or not to say Happy Holidays or Merry Christmas. They're geared up to being a victim. Why isn't Kamala and President Biden not trying to get the votes tallied up before the inauguration? They'll get done by then. I don't know that there's much more they can do. I mean, states have to get their elections certified here. There are dates coming up in there's a date coming up in December when every state has to have their election certified, which means all the vote counting will be done by then. And before he got blocked, George said, every Democratic run state is going bankrupt, except it's the other way around. It's the other way around. Democratic run states, for the majority, are the giver states. They're the ones that are running on a surplus, and they pay in more to the federal government than what they take back in aid to their people. As a whole. Now, there are some Republican-led states that do end up not being nearly as big a taker states, Texas and Florida mostly. But for the most part, blue states are generator states. Lola says, we are the generators. Give me a break. Exactly. Tom Powell Jr. does a better job of explaining the numbers, way better than I will attempt to it. But a lot of states, it's like for every dollar that they kick into, for the blue states anyway, they kick $1 in for tax revenue, right, into the federal government. They only get back like 80 cents back or something like that in government things. So that's 20 cents for every 20 cent for every dollar that they spend into the federal tax system that they don't see. That goes to a red state. And that could be something that covers an infrastructure program. It could be food stamps. It could be Medicare, Medicaid, housing assistance, any kind of assistance program. And when they want to talk about cutting those programs, the Republican voters are voting for people that want to cut the programs they depend on. Now, not every Republican voter is on those kind of assistance. But the states that are Republican run are typically on assistance. Yeah, as far as George and his comment about blue states going broke, George is already gone. As I said earlier, I don't deal with them. They typically don't add much to the conversation, or they add stuff that's just totally wrong. And they don't have any curiosity to learn. That's half the problem. I remember taking government and civics my senior year, and our final for that was a version of the citizenship test. And the teacher had to grade it on a curve because most American-born citizens at 18 couldn't pass it. Couldn't pass the citizenship test. We have an issue in this country with education. We need to do a better job of teaching about how government works and what our government actually does. An unintelligent person is always looking for a scapegoat. Yeah, exactly. They're always looking for a reason to blame somebody else, and that's part of why you get these groups that you would think wouldn't want to be part of the MAGA movement that end up there because they're convinced that the people that MAGA is going after, because they're part of the MAGA movement, they're better than the other group, and they're the scapegoat. California's not going anywhere near broke. Fact check me, please. Yeah, California's not going anywhere near broke. They're like the 5th strongest economy in the world. If they broke off and were their own country tomorrow, they would be 100% fine and completely able to sustain themselves. Speaking of that, there was that Democratic rep, I think it was a rep or maybe a senator or something from New York, who was talking about how New York and a few other Democratic-leaning states should break off, secede, and join Canada. And I'm going to say to them the same thing I would say if it was the Republicans talking about it. That's dumb. We fought an entire civil war over whether or not states had the right to secede from the Union. That's been settled, and basically it's no. They can't just leave. And so what? because the next couple of years are going to be a little tough because the person you didn't want to win or your party didn't win, now you want to leave. You want to take your entire state and leave the union. No, you stand and fight, and you make fun of them when they fail, because they're gonna fail. They're not gonna get as much done as what they claim. I mean, a big number. I'm thinking a good number of Donald Trump's cabinet picks aren't going to get through the Senate. His picks aren't going to make it through the Senate. There's at least some of them. I mean, that's why Matt Gaetz withdrew his nomination. And Donald Trump immediately, he backed down. Alaska used to belong to Russia. Never know if Putin tries to take it like Ukraine. Exactly. There was something a while ago. They were trying to reclaim their dominion over Russia, and Russia was trying to reclaim their dominion over Alaska. We just laughed at them and said, "Yeah, that's not going to happen. You sold it to us fair and square." Miss Singleton says you have some very good informative information. Well, thank you. Trump never had a full cabinet last time. Went through 6 secretaries of defense. Exactly. He keeps saying that he hires only the best people, but then the minute they embarrass him or whatever, or they get into a little bit of trouble, he fires them. Oh, well, they really weren't that good. Well, what is it? Do you not hire the best? Or what? Do you think he will he will get rid of the Department of Education? I think, as TJ says, yeah, he's going to try, but I don't know if it gets to, again, to eliminate a department, you would have to go through Congress, and I just don't know if they would have the votes to get it through Congress, and I don't know if they could do it as some kind of a reconciliation budget thing to get around the filibuster in the Senate. But if they can't get past the filibuster, I don't see 7 Democrats siding with all 53 Republican senators to get past the filibuster. How many votes does he need? Well, he would need to get past the filibuster. I'm assuming in the Senate, that is 60 votes. There are 53 Republican senators. So he would need 7 Democrats. In the House, he would need a simple majority, which is 218. There's going to be 220 Republican senators. But that means if 3 Republicans say, yeah, fuck that shit, we're not getting rid of the Department of Education, the Department of Education stays. You know, now if they can get around the filibuster somehow, maybe they would only need a simple majority, which would be 51, but in the Senate. But I just don't think it's going to happen. Because, okay, Katrina wants me to explain the filibuster. The filibuster it's been modified several times. It is something that goes back to the origins of the Senate and the founding of the Constitution in 1789. Basically, the filibuster, you need a supermajority to bring a bill up to a vote. What the filibuster used to be was, if I was the senator, and the movie Mr. Smith Goes to Washington is a good example of the filibuster. But basically, if I wanted to stop a bill from getting voted on, I would talk it to death. Exactly. You would just keep talking and talking and talking and talking and talking. Well, they have kind of leaned up on the filibuster on that side. Now it's just, if they push it, yes, somebody would have to get up and talk it to death. But otherwise, they just say, I want to filibuster that, and they would have to call for a vote, and if they can't get 60 votes to pass it around that filibuster move, it doesn't get brought up for a final vote. Katrina says, you remember that from high school civics. Exactly. I've seen Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, or a version of Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. I don't know if it's been remade. Um, and the whole point was you used to have to talk and talk and talk. But eventually, you would stop talking. Somebody would say, okay, I move past your time. And eventually you would still be able to, either you would talk some people onto your side to vote against the bill, or you would bore them to the point where they would leave, and you would change the math of what you needed to pass a bill. Because they have to get a majority of those present to pass a bill. Now we say it's 60 to get around the filibuster, and then it's simple majority, 51. But if there's only 98 senators in the building, it becomes 50 votes because that's simple majority. It's math. Well, listen, some people were up there for many hours. Exactly. I mean, I remember when just several years ago, I think it was during the Obama administration, Ted Cruz was reading Dr. Seuss books as part of a filibuster. Because he was just talking a bill to death. And I was saying, when I thought the election was going to go the complete opposite way, and that Democrats were going to have the House, Senate, and Kamala Harris was going to be president, and they were talking about the Democrats having the votes to get rid of the filibuster, I said, they don't need to necessarily get rid of it. Just bring it back to the point where you have to keep talking, because eventually you're going to stop and they're going to be able to move past it and bring stuff up for a vote. Now, some people are wondering if the Republicans are going to change the filibuster. And they could, but the thing about changing the filibuster is they would eventually be in the minority party. Do I think Robert Kennedy will be confirmed? Please say no. Do I think he will be confirmed? It's possible, but not probable. I think some of the most egregious picks are probably not getting through. We already saw him push back against Matt Gaetz. I don't know if RFK Jr. gets through. I don't know if Dr. Oz gets through. I don't know if Linda McMahon makes it through the Senate. Just because they have to go back and they have to go back and get reelected in 2 to 4 years. And those senators are going to have to say, yeah, I voted to confirm RFK Jr. as the head of Health and Human Services. As the guy's known anti-vaxxer, and he wants to take a bunch of pills off the market, including Ozempic, which is a weight loss drug. And, I don't know that they can go back to their districts, to their states, and run on an election where they voted some of these people into high-ranking government positions. I don't see it happening. Some of them will get through, but I think Linda McMahon probably doesn't make it. Pete Hegseth probably doesn't make it. If Elon has a say in it, he'll make sure they all get confirmed. It's pay for play. No, I mean, he might try. Here's the thing. He was pushing for Rick Scott to be the Senate Majority Leader. So was Trump. Mitch McConnell sat back and said, yeah, we're doing a secret ballot because we can. And Rick Scott got third place. And we got John Thune as Senate Majority Leader. Now that Mitch McConnell is out of Senate, he's not in leadership necessarily anymore. He's going to sit back and he can put his thumb on the scale and help confirm or deny some of these people. Um, and he's going to do a little bit of that because even though he's an awful person, he really is, he cares about keeping Republicans um, in power. So he's not going to let them tear down the Senate specifically. How did delegate vote work? What do you mean? Noticed Elon has yet to leave Trump's side. He's nervous to leave Trump alone. Exactly. He is. Because, well, they're two peas in a pod. Eventually they're going to butt heads. And when it comes down to it, Donald Trump's not going to like somebody upstaging him and their personalities when they don't mesh. He's going to kick Elon to the curb. But he also is trying to keep close to Trump at every step because he's afraid that if he gets too far away, more rational voices are going to start talking to Trump, pat him on the back and say, you know, Donnie, if you got rid of Elon Musk, you'd look like a genius for using all of his money and and kicking him to the curb like that. You'd look great because you got all that money from him and he helped you out. And people would say you're great. That's all it takes for Donald Trump to be all in on an idea. Or he's afraid Trump is going to spill the beans on whatever they did. Yeah, that would be the other thing. And now I don't know, after the elections have been certified, there's not much that could happen. Short of the 25th Amendment or impeachment. Are they going to recount the delegate votes? Oh, you mean recounting the states and figuring out for the Electoral College? I don't know if there are any recounts going on. I have not heard of any for the presidential race. I've heard of some for state races, House races, Senate races, things like that, because they're so close. And as it's sitting, we're going to have only like a 3-seat margin for the House of Representatives with Republicans in control. There's still 3 races they have not called because they are still going through recounts, trying to figure out who's going to actually win. You believe Elon will bring chips to chip people. Already put one in a brain this past January. I hadn't heard that they put one in a person's brain. Something like that, though, would probably... I don't know how they can do that. If they tried it with an executive order and trying to force people to get a microchip or something, that would be tied up in the courts and probably tossed. I don't know if they could pass something with Congress, but again, I think that would get tied up in the courts. Unreasonable search and seizure, maybe, or unreasonable punishment derived of personal freedoms, things like that. It's amazing to me that the party that likes to cheer about freedoms and personal responsibility and all sorts of stuff is all for the government doing all sorts of stuff like that. Lance isn't ranting here. Exactly. Yeah, he comes in Trump Elon. Elon wasn't even running. You're in North Carolina, damn near everybody we want up and down the ballot except for Kamala. Yeah, I have been racking my brain over it for the last several weeks now. And I think it's a combination of several things. 2020, because of the pandemic, a lot of states made it really easy to vote. They mailed you everything, okay? You didn't have to leave your house. You didn't have to go anywhere. You didn't have to find your polling place. You didn't have to figure out early voting, none of it. Everything was mailed to you. They mailed you a voter registration card. They mailed you an absentee ballot request. They mailed you the ballot, and all you got to do is mail it back. Easy. Well, a lot of states changed the laws. Like here in Iowa, the Secretary of State is not allowed to mail out absentee ballots to every voter, or even ballot request forms. You have to go to the county auditor and you have to request one yourself. I think that was part of it. In Iowa also limited early voting, took 9 days off the early voting. Used to be 29 days, they shrunk it to 20 after the 2020 election. That was part of it. Some people didn't vote for Kamala Harris because they were mad about how Joe Biden got pushed aside, so they didn't vote for Kamala Harris. Some people were mad about how Kamala became the nominee because there wasn't a primary after Joe Biden stepped aside, but we had already had the primaries. We had a 10-day window or so from the day she became the nominee to when the Democrats had to have a person certified as their official nominee ahead of the DNC convention. They had like 10 days. Or there were going to be several states, Ohio, Alabama, and maybe one more, where Kamala Harris wouldn't be on the ballot at all. So they had to do it, or whoever the nominee was. Didn't have to be the Democratic nominee. Didn't have to be Kamala Harris. Whoever they picked. Rita says you had to vote in person because it was damn near impossible to absentee. Exactly. A lot of states did that. So Democrats were up against it with having to have somebody in like 10 days, maybe 2 weeks, but it was really close. So, and Joe Biden had endorsed Kamala Harris at that point. That's the whole thing. Well, then maybe DNC leaders shouldn't have hidden Biden's mental condition. Yeah. It wasn't his mental condition. He had a bad debate and he looked bad because of his, he had a stressful day. Apparently he was suffering from some kind of a cold and he was on cold medicine, things like that. And in part, he was trying to fact check Donald Trump in real time. He had a bad debate. But then for 3 weeks, the media kept running this narrative about how bad Joe Biden is. And is he fit? Is he dropping out of the race? Is he gonna keep running the race? Is he gonna still be on the ballot in November? And for 3 weeks, Joe Biden said, I'm not going anywhere. I'm not going anywhere. I'm not going anywhere. The very next day, this person's calling for Joe Biden to step aside. That person's calling for Joe Biden to step aside. They drugged Joe Biden through the mud for 3 weeks before he finally said, okay, fine, enough. You get your way. I'm stepping aside. But I'm nominating Kamala Harris. Now, the question is, and I've asked this to those people who are mad about how Kamala Harris became the nominee, would you still be mad if Joe Biden had passed away? Not stepped aside, but just passed away. And she became president because that happened. And she ended up running the race the rest of the way. And there was no contest, etc., because she was the incumbent president. Would they still have been mad? Would they still have not voted for her? I don't know. Nobody's, they never tell you which way that would go. As far as them trying, the DNC wasn't the one who agreed to the debate. That was the Trump and Biden campaigns. Biden agreed to it because he thought he was going to make Donald Trump look like a fool. I mean, Donald Trump did not win that debate by any stretch of the imagination. He lost. Joe Biden just lost it worse. There wasn't a winner in that debate. And Kamala Harris definitely won their debate. Um, Donald Trump did not do a good debate against Joe Biden. And if people were listening to the things he actually said, and I think a lot of the Trump voters don't listen to what Donald Trump is actually saying in the moment. And, I think they get wrapped up in I'm going to take care of Skippy here. But they get wrapped up in the emotion and the pageantry and just the atmosphere, and they don't listen to what the words of Trump, what Trump says. Uh, Republicans were hell bent on trying to disqualify her by referencing the Dred Scott ruling. Yeah, they were dragging up all kinds of stuff, and this is. I said this at the time. If she wasn't qualified to be president, how is she vice president? Those same things that would supposedly be disqualifying her to be president would also disqualify her from the vice presidency. But because it never got brought up, it wasn't a thing. It was the same thing they were trying to do with Obama and his birth certificate all over again. Trying to come up with any sort of a thing that would somehow work in their favor. And they were trying to disqualify her by doing all sorts of stuff like that. They were trying to say, well, she wasn't really born in Oakland, or, well, her parents were both immigrants, so that doesn't make her a citizen, even though she was born on American soil. The 14th Amendment says any person born on or born in the United States and subject to its jurisdiction is a citizen. What more do you need? She was born here. But they were so bent on trying to disqualify her that way because they didn't think they could win on policy. They didn't think they could win. They shouldn't have been able to win based on their policies and what they were running on. That's the part that's disheartening. Talking about mass deportations. What happened December the 11th, 2024? Is December 11th? December 11th might be the day they have to have the states all certified. And the actual electors will meet. Now, both parties typically have a group of people predetermined to be electors. And if their person wins the state, then that group will show up on, I think it's December 11th. And that's the day they gather and they officially cast their vote as the Electoral College. It's ceremonial, but I guess it's possible that the electors could vote for somebody else. But typically the parties pick the people ahead of time so they know for sure they're going to vote for their candidate. I don't think I don't think it's going to be a thing. Also, Jill Stein's evil self didn't help the situation either. She did the same thing to Hillary. Jill Stein, any of the third parties. Where's Jill Stein now? Anybody heard from her? Didn't win a single state. I don't think she got 1% of the popular vote nationwide. And she'll go back into hiding for 4 more years, and then you'll hear about her again in the run-up to the 2028 election. The third parties in this country, they are so hell-bent on winning just the presidency, it doesn't do a damn bit of good. If the third parties would actually be serious about winning elections, they should focus on districts where, like heavy, maybe not heavy Republican, but where like Democrats don't run a candidate because there's nobody. Look at what the guy in uh, Nebraska did. The independent running for senator. He had a shot. Now he didn't win, but that independent had a chance to unseat the senator in Nebraska. And they were spending money that they didn't think they had to spend in Nebraska for a race that shouldn't have been close to have a chance at potentially unseating that Nebraska senator. Fisher, I believe. Now, if the Green Party would have ran a candidate there and did that well, maybe won a seat, now there's a chance they have a little bit of power. Even if some miracle would have happened and Jill Stein would have won the presidency November 5th, let's just say some miracle happened and she got to 270 electoral votes. How's she getting anything passed? How? Because there's nobody in Congress that would be there to help her get legislation pushed through. She would have to work with one party or the other to get anything done. The president is only so powerful. The reason why a lot of the presidents end up being good presidents, like the ones you remember, and get stuff done, is they have either a way of making deals in Congress when they don't have majorities for their party in Congress, or their party also controls Congress. One of the reasons FDR was able to do as much as he did with the New Deal was because after, I keep mentioning this, but after Hubert Hoover crashed the economy with the stock market crash and said, well, it'll fix itself, and did nothing other than tariffs and crashed it even harder, you had 20 years of Democratic president and Democratic controlled Congress, Senate and House, except for 2 years of the Truman administration, like 16 years later. That's how stuff gets passed through Congress. You know, FDR wouldn't have been nearly as good of a president if he didn't have a favorable Congress backing him. So a third party saying, I'm gonna run for president but have no representation in Congress, you're not gonna get anything done. It's a wasted vote. It's a wasted vote. And then they go back into hiding. You know, you probably won't hear very many libertarians running for any House seats in the midterms, Senate seats in the midterms. Now, there were some issues with a couple libertarians here in Iowa trying to get on the state ballot, or on the ballot for House reps, for U.S. House representatives. And they had issues because they weren't following the state guidelines for the correct procedures to select their nominee. Now, I don't quite remember all the details, but it was something like they can't get petitions exactly. They have like they didn't hold like their district convention on a different day than their county conventions or something. Like they didn't do the conventioning part of it right that followed Iowa law. So therefore they didn't do the process right to get on the ballot. Chill and Laid Back says, you have made me feel a little bit better about Donald Trump's election. Well, I appreciate that, you know, what I'm saying has helped. Keep in mind, as I've talked about a couple times, they're only going to have a 3-seat margin in the House. And we got the filibuster in the Senate. And they can't get along. They didn't get along his first term. Donald Trump didn't get all of his cabinet picks through the first time. He didn't. They denied some of his picks, and they'll have even less reason to authorize all of his picks this time. And as far as passing legislation, they can't agree with themselves. During Trump's first administration, they couldn't agree on how to fund the government when they had the House and the Senate And they shut the government down for a couple of weeks, I believe, if I remember correctly. So much fear mongering. Yeah, there's a lot of fear mongering about what could happen. Because it could be bad if they do get what they want. But some of it they just don't have the votes to do. Like eliminating elections. They don't have the votes to change the Constitution to eliminate elections. There will be elections in 2026 in the midterms. Irish says most of his cabinet was gone within the first 6 months to a year. Yeah, exactly. That's what I said earlier. He kept saying he hired only the best people, then turned around and fired them. And then says, well, they weren't really good. I didn't know enough about them. I was fed bad information or whatever excuse he had for firing them. But he did help us in some ways. I mean, remember, his first attorney general was Jeff Sessions, who was a senator, who was a pain in the ass. He got pulled out of the Senate and made attorney general. Didn't last very long. Donald Trump ended up firing him because I think it was over the Mueller investigation and not killing it or something like that, if I remember right. But got him out of the Senate. And Donald Trump's already pulled a few people out of the Senate and the House. Marco Rubio's not going to be in the Senate anymore. Because he's going to be Secretary of State, which isn't... Like, Marco Rubio is not a horrible pick. Not a great pick, but he's not horrible. He's not Matt Gaetz horrible. He pulled 3 people out of the House of Representatives. And even if they get those 3 seats back after special elections, it is entirely possible because of those 3 seats that until the special elections are done and those seats get filled, they could be down to a 1 vote margin in the House of Representatives, which means it just takes one Republican to say, I don't want to pass that for the bill to fail. Because all the Democrats will vote against some of the worst stuff. And that's where the Democrats are going to have their power. They're going to be able to go to a couple of the Republicans and say, hey, if you guys put this up, you got all of us to vote for it. And they can throw their weight behind something, and that carries a lot of weight when it comes to getting stuff done. Look what they did this past congressional session before they ousted Kevin McCarthy as Speaker of the House. They saved Kevin McCarthy the first time and said, hey, you work with us. We'll say, we pass a clean budget, etc. Well, and if they try to oust you, we'll save you. That's exactly what they did. Marco Rubio doesn't even show up to vote. Exactly. That's part of why Joe Biden's able to get all of his judge positions filled and get them confirmed, because it lowers the threshold. Could we file a lawsuit about the agency Elon Musk got? TJ says probably not, because it's not a thing. Exactly. It's not currently a cabinet level position. It's not currently a government department. In order to create the Department of Government Efficiency, it would take an act of Congress and a bill that Donald Trump would have to sign that would authorize exactly what the scope of the department is, what their budget is, what their duties are, everything. And because of the Supreme Court overturning the Chevron deference decision, they would have to be very specific as to what it could do. Because now, with the Chevron deference decision gone, the Supreme Court said the courts do not have to defer to the agency when there's a gap in the wording of the bill that created the agency or gave them their directive or whatever. It used to be that, hey, it was some gray area here. Um, then we will fill it in. The agency could fill in the gap itself, and now the courts can say, "Yeah, we don't think that's exactly what this law means. We'll fill in that gap." What do you think about what he's doing to Vindeman? Uh, I don't know what he's doing to Vindeman. I haven't heard that one. I know Vindeman was a witness against him. I believe wasn't it one of it is a impeachment for the Ukraine money. So I don't know what Donald Trump's doing to Vindeman. Um, oh, it's what Elon's doing. Still not sure what he's doing. Um, but they're going. I'm guessing they're going after him for something. I don't know. As far as this Department of Government Efficiency, oh, it's revenge. Oh, accusing him of treason. Well, that'd be an interesting one to prove. Would require, uh, depending on if he's a military, if he's still active military, it would be a court martial, I believe, or it would be criminal charges. High bar to prove. Elon is threatening him on X. Yeah, that the whole Twitter thing. Elon buys it for $44 billion, has tanked it to 10, and it's continuing to tank as everybody's switching over to Blue Sky. Elon said Vindeman needs to be punished. Yeah, that's just for going after Donald. It's all about revenge. It's all about going after the people that Donald has perceived having wronged him. We'll see what ends up coming out of the retribution and the revenge. I know a lot of people are saying Pam Bondi, Donald Trump's latest pick for Attorney General, isn't going to be nearly as interested in doing the revenge prosecutions as Donald Trump may want her to be, and definitely not how gung ho about it Matt Gates would have been. So those things may not actually happen. And if he tries to go too far against it, again, the Republicans are going to have to push back against him. And they might, because I keep saying it, they have to get reelected. And if he's doing nothing but hurting the Republican brand, they may have no choice but to step in and say it's it's too far. Rita says it's like there's no adults. Exactly. And what's going to happen is these next 2 years, it's gonna hurt. It's not going to be fun. The economy is gonna suffer. And when things get bad enough, come midterms, Democrats will take the House and the Senate, block the rest of whatever Donald Trump wants to do. He'll be weak, and and they'll end up um, voting in a Democrat for president in 2028, and Democrats ought to be the adults in the room once again and fix everything. So did I hear you say everyone is leaving Twitter X and going to Blue Sky? That's what I'm hearing. Um, Now I haven't used. I've got a Blue Sky account. I've barely used it at all. I haven't really looked into it much. But I hear a lot of people are switching over. Um, I've heard for content creators, they have a 1 minute upper limit to where your videos can only be a minute long. Um, so I couldn't just post my TikToks and post them over on Blue Sky. So I don't know what I'm going to do with it yet, if I do anything with it. Uh, but I'm hearing a lot of people are switching, and they're just getting ridiculous numbers of new subscribers as people are leaving Twitter in mass. And he's going to crater that even more. He took a successful company and it's failing. And now that Donald Trump is back over on Twitter and he's buddy with Elon, it's going to be interesting to see how long he keeps losing money with Truth Social. You're worried about them dismantling the Department of Education, among other things. Well, I talked about it earlier, but I'll mention it again. To dismantle the Department of Education would require an act of Congress. It would have to pass Congress. Now, I don't know if they can get around the filibuster to do that. You know, if they can do it without the filibuster being a thing, or if the Democrats could just filibuster it and be done with it, and that's the end of it. But again, they're only going to have like a 3-seat margin in the House. Even if they can get around the filibuster in the Senate, and assuming all Republicans are on board, they only need to lose 3 Republicans in the House, and they can't get rid of the Department of Education. Now they're going to have to do and I just don't think some congressional Republicans are going to be able to say, yeah, we did our best to get rid of it and try to run on it. I just don't know if congressional Republicans are going to be able to go back to their states and districts and run when they need to get reelected on a campaign of, look at what we did. We got rid of the Department of Education. Because a lot of the things the Department of Education does has nothing to do with curriculum. It's about making sure people have access to school, making sure people get admitted to school, making sure that the facilities are, ADA compliant, things like that. That they help fund a lot of the programs that help people with special needs be able to learn and get through school. And I think when you actually break it down, and if you talk about the ideas of what's in it, even some of the hardest MAGA supporters don't really want to get rid of a lot of that. It's like with the Affordable Care Act. I remember when it passed, was talking to somebody about it who was conservative leaning. This was pre-MAGA. The cruelty is the point. Yeah, it is a little bit. But I think some of it is, for at least the voters, it's just lack of understanding. It might be cruelty on the idea. Like, the cruelty might be the idea for the politicians, but not for the voters. When the Affordable Care Act came out, what I was starting to say, you believe there should be a separation between church and state, which the incoming is intertwined. Oh, very much so. The Republicans have intertwined the far right into their politics, into everything. And there should be a separation of church and state. As much as the First Amendment, the Establishment Clause, says Congress shall make no law pertaining to an establishment of a religion, is as much of it as allowing you to practice any religion you want without there being a national religion like what happened in England with the Church of England. It is also freedom from religion, which means no one has to practice a religion if they don't want to. And they should not be forced in things that involve the government to have to practice a religion. Um, there have been multiple Supreme Court cases involving prayer in school. And ever since Madeleine O'Hair, prayer has been out of school. They don't allow the Ten Commandments to be posted. They don't want the Bible being taught in public school because that is not the place of the government. The government shouldn't be making rules, picking one religion or another. Rita says Bibles in all schools is what's next. Gonna try, probably. And they're probably going to try to make them Trump-branded Bibles so he gets his kickback and his commission. Here's the thing. That'll get tied up in the courts. It'll end up before the Supreme Court. And we'll have to see how this Supreme Court rules. But a lot of this stuff is going to get tied up in the courts for so long that the incoming Trump administration will be out of power before some of this stuff gets settled. And this happens with attorney generals on both sides of the political aisle, on both parties, is whoever the Democrats win, or assuming Democrats win in 2028, and whoever the Democratic president in 2028 picks to be their attorney general, that person, if there is a law or a regulation about Bibles in schools that's being defended in the courts, they can choose not to defend it and not put up a defense of that law and that rule. Now, Donald Trump and his administration can do the same thing about rules and regulations and laws that they don't like, and they can choose not to defend laws that are on the books. There's nothing saying they have to go and defend the law if they don't agree with it. And they can just say, well, we're going to throw it on the mercy of the court and basically let the courts using their best judgment to decide if this law or this rule or regulation is constitutional or not. So this stuff could all get tied up in the courts for so long it's not funny. Like the denaturalization process. To denaturalize the amount of people that he's talking would either take an act of Congress or they would have to start having massive court dates, which they don't have the funding and the time frame for judges that handle those kind of cases. It would be tied up in the courts for years, well beyond the end of this administration. Like the next court dates for naturalization, immigration, things like that, for stuff like this is like 4 or 5 years out from what I'm hearing. And I'm just hearing that from other creators on here that are in that field, and that's their area of expertise, but what else can you listen to? I don't think there's going to be Bibles in all the schools. I think they're going to try, but I just don't think it's going to happen. They tried it in Oklahoma. That got temporarily banned. They tried posting the Ten Commandments in Louisiana. Courts have said, no, we're gonna look at that. This stuff is going to get tied up in courts. It's gonna be a mess. So it's not going to be all rainbows and unicorns for the incoming Trump administration. It's just not. They're not going to be able to get as much as they want done. As we've seen with Donald Trump and his criminal indictments, the justice system moves slow. It moves at a very slow pace. And I think the Democrats need to use that to their advantage this time, when it's typically Republicans who want to, sue and slow things down and do this and do that. I think Democrats need to take a page out of Republicans' playbooks and slow things down. Sue. When they put stuff in, bring court cases and file endless motions and try to get, stop it and tie it up in the courts as long as they can. Yeah, Democrats are not the ones who typically slow things down. We'll just deal with that. But I think that's what Democrats need to do. They need to slow things down, delay everything as long as they can. I don't think Donald Trump will make it his entire presidency. Some people are questioning whether there's something wrong with him, because you haven't really seen him out doing appearances, doing interviews, things like that. It's been mostly Truth Social posts ever since he went to the SpaceX launch with Elon. And I don't know if there's anything to that, but he's not in the best of physical shape, and he looked horrible at that rocket launch. I've only seen a couple of photos, but he did not look good. He might not be in the best of health, just looking at him. His diet is horrible. He's very clearly showing signs of mental decline. And that cognitive test he constantly brags about acing is the kind of test you give to somebody who is suffering from early onset dementia or from some kind of dementia symptoms. Now, you would tell them that they would pass it whether they did or not. I've seen people who they were worried about having mental issues after major medical events. They would give them a piece of paper like, draw a clock, like a analog clock and a clock face or something like that, and just see how they wrote on it or whatever. And they'd always tell them, very good, no matter how they actually did. So you would tell him he passed it regardless. But it was a sign for an early test for mental decline. So I don't know if he makes it his 4 years. Something may happen to him and he might not make it. And if he passes, well, we get President J.D. Vance. If it becomes absolutely bad enough, J.D. Vance would have to use the 25th Amendment and have Congress remove him. That's what it's there for. It's not just because, he's deranged enough that they want to remove him or something like that. It's for a situation where something medically happened or whatever, and the president is not fit to be president. Because, if the president, whoever it was, let's say they had a stroke today, went into a coma, and, they could do it as a temporary thing, and J.D. Vance could use, or whoever, the VP, could use the 25th Amendment and say, hey, they're unfit until they're out of the coma. And there's some wording in there about deadlines and timing and how often they have to check in, etc. But while something had happened, J.D. Vance would be the acting president or whoever the VP is. And then they would have the authority and all of the powers of the president. They also use it when, a president goes under anesthesia. Now, typically nothing happens, and, you wouldn't have, they wouldn't pass any piece of major legislation around the time of a planned procedure where the president would be under anesthesia. But if something were to happen, and the president was under anesthesia, for example, or in this case, I mentioned a coma or whatever, while acting president, the acting president would have the authority to sign a bill and make it law. And that's what it's there for. JD Vance is their guy, especially when it comes to Project 2025. He is. However, Project 2025 still needs, there's a lot of things that they need to pass through Congress. And they just don't have the votes to do a lot of it. And they really don't have the votes when it comes to changing the Constitution. A lot of the stuff they want, where like they want to consolidate powers, eliminate departments, things like that. I don't think they have the votes in Congress to make it happen. I just don't. They've got such a thin majority in the Senate. They've got 3 seats in the House. Out of 435, they're only having the majority by 3. That's pretty thin. I just don't know what how much of Project 2025 they can do and still get reelected. That's the thing. Like, if they had major margins, they might try more of it. But with it being so thin, and especially with the special elections coming up, and you never know how special elections could go. Special elections get weird because they're always in a weird month. They're typically not on election day. Sometimes they do fall into the typical election schedule because that's how it works. But special elections typically are on in random months, and you just never know how special elections could go. So they could potentially be, go from 3 seats to 2 seats or something like that. It mathematically would be possible for if all 3 special election seats for the House, and I know it's unlikely given which seats they are, that all 3 could flip Democrat. But if they would, you could have a situation where the Democrats regain control of the House after the special elections are done. It's possible. Unlikely, but possible. And never count out special elections. They're just, as much as they may want to get Project 2025 going, with them having such narrow margins, it's going to be very hard for them to do almost anything. TikTok Rocker Girl says, enjoy you as a guest over on Rational Boomer. Oh, well, thank you. For those of you who maybe don't know, I do routinely guest over on the Rational Boomer podcast. I get on there a couple times a month for sure. And Mike and I always have a great conversation. We talk about what's going on, where things are sitting, where things are going from now, what could happen. And Mike puts on a great podcast. I enjoyed it just listening to any of his podcasts, and I will admit the only one I don't listen to are the ones I'm on because I was there. I don't need to rehash it again. But always he's got a lot of good guests, and we just have a conversation, talk about the news, the events of the day. Like I said, whatever's going on. And we were all wrong. Almost all of us said it was going to be Kamala Harris in a landslide. Didn't happen. Thought Democrats were going to have the House and the Senate. Didn't happen. But we talk about a lot of things. We talked about when it happened. We talked about the debate. We talk about kind of like what we're doing here. It's always a great show over there. And Rational Boomer is here on TikTok. Check him out. And from there, he's got a link tree which would link you over to the podcast. And I try on the days that I am a guest, I try to do a video at least sometime that day saying, hey, I'm on the podcast. I'm today's guest. Check it out. I'm probably going to try to be on here sometime soon. I don't know what his schedule's looking like. I haven't reached out to him yet. But, you know, whenever the mood strikes, I just shoot him an email, said, hey, I want to come on. We work out a time and sit and have a conversation. Kind of like what I'm doing here. Except instead of reading text, I actually have somebody talking back to me. Um, all right. Well, I've been going about an hour and a half. Um, let's see. $25 for avocados soon. Trump's tariffs. Yeah, exactly. Uh, his tariffs are going to end up costing us a lot of money, and we're going to pay the brunt of it. And we don't. A lot of people don't even realize it yet. But I'm going to start. I'm going to wrap this up. I've been going about an hour and a half. I thank everybody who took the time to, listen to me ramble for an hour and a half and discuss things. We had a great conversation. For those of you that came in later or missed part of it, I do record all my lives. They are going to be up over on my YouTube page. I am Analytical Iowan on YouTube. There is a link tree in my bio. And I think there's also a link just straight to my YouTube. This will be up as soon as YouTube allows it to upload, depending on upload speeds and all of that fun stuff. Some days it's temperamental and gives me issues. But anyway, this will be up over on my YouTube page. Also, there on my YouTube page, I do post all my TikToks, and I do have a few longer form videos that are too long for TikTok on what I call my Government Answers playlist, where I see things that people are getting wrong about how government and civics work, just in general. And I discuss all of it over there and just try to clarify things. So I encourage you guys to check it out if you'd like. Appreciate you guys for taking the time to engage in this live. Don't know when I'll be live next. Probably sometime over the weekend. Just depends how my schedule pans out. So I will catch you the next time I go live. All right, we wrapping it up. Had a good live again. A lot of great people. Great conversation. Didn't entirely go the direction I thought it would, but these things never do. So, want to thank you for taking the time to join me, and I will catch you.